Hello and welcome to episode 66 of Constructing Comics, a podcast building stories one page and one panel at a time. On this episode, we have a review of House of X, issue 6, I Am Not Ashamed, and Powers of 10, issue 6, House of X. This is your spoiler alert for House of X and Powers of 10, issue 6, and the issues before. Your creative teams on these comics are writer Jonathan Hickman, penciler R.B. Silva on Powers of 10, Pepe Larraz on House of X. Those are also your inkers. Your colorist is Marte Gracia. Your letterers are, Virtual Calligraphy and Clayton Cowles. Your editors are Annalise Bissa, C.B. Cebulski, and Jordan D. White. X-Men created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. This is Matt, and I'm joined by Constructing Comics co-host Noah.
Hey there.
Hey, Noah, as normal, before we do our deep dive, why don't you lead us off with some general thoughts on these two issue 6s that cap the series?
They were a great cap. It's interesting that it reused a twist that I didn't see coming. So, Moira's been the twist throughout the whole issue, and I guess it's been used twice. Her abilities have been used as a twist up until this point. And then this final issue of Powers, it was a third time, like another twist. And it tied everything together as to what was going on. I really liked that part. So I really liked, I always like things in groups of threes. So whenever something is repeated 3 times, I always find that it's satisfying. And the ending is good. There's a lot of jumping off to do from there. And there's a lot of, open-ended questions. And then at the same time, there's a lot of ambiguous questions, Yeah. So, there's not ambiguous. Sorry, there are a lot of open-ended answers, a lot of ambiguous answers as well as to what's going to happen going forward. And we still don't know the full story of certain things. So I'm sure that's just this sort of series has made it clear that this is a reset for the X-Men. And this is basically this whole series has been the issue 0 of the new series.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of my disappointment. I understand that Big Two Comics, everything has to keep going month to month, but I really wish with the last issue of Powers of 10, we would have gotten some more like X universe shaking developments. We for 5 issues we've been on this roller coaster, and we just basically on that last page we were like, hey, and again, this is to be expected. It was, hey, check out Uncanny. Check out what's going to happen in Uncanny 1 and the series that are spinning out of this.
Right.
So I know it's probably a bit of a tightrope you gotta work you gotta walk. Excuse me, that was a bad cliche. When you're writing a Big Two comic and you go on month to month, and these stories have to continue, for the foreseeable future. But I really wish there was, something. We've already said spoilers, but it would have been cool if that the helmet would have came off of Charlie one time and just we could have seen. But I don't know. Is he gonna wear that helmet for the rest of however many issues of Uncanny and what comes next? But it was I hate to say a fizzle, but it was I feel like it was kind of a fizzle at the end.
Yeah, I'd agree too. I think on further dissection we'll find a complete arc of a story in there, and I think as we discussed tonight, I think we'll see a full arc. But I do agree that it was a very fizzly book. But I kind of like where it ended. I think the storytelling throughout the whole thing between Hickman and his 2 artists really make the book something that'll live on as one of those iconic arcs of any comic series, of any kind of superhero book. I haven't changed my mind about that, even though it did sort of fizzle out. But I think that I think it's going to go down in history as being sort of one of those resets or reboots that sort of changed the game. Because Hickman really took it very seriously. You know, like he took this opportunity to tell basically a corporate mandated reboot the way that he wanted to. So I think that right there kind of doesn't make me too disappointed in it, because I think even at the end, he's still telling the story he wants to tell, and even more so pushing the story where he wants it to go for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty, you know, a pretty unique position to be in when you're a comic book writer, and especially with iconic characters. So the fact that he was able to do that without any kind of like, I mean, it seems like there was no corporate mandate outside of just do your thing. And that's pretty impressive. And it's to just give that kind of creative control over to an individual and the team that he assembles. So I think the series stuck true to that. So I don't feel like it's compromised in the end too much, because it is comics, right? You know, it's not gonna end ever, right? That's the tragedy of comics, right? Is that there's never going to be a happy ending for anyone, because it's always going to be, the evil's always going to come back and the good guys are going to have to fight them. But also, this book sort of points that out as well. And we'll get into that this book sort of deconstructs narrative in an interesting way.
Yeah. Whenever you're writing one of these, you know, big two superhero books, you have to create drama and suspense and get everybody excited. And think that there's, you know, these horrible outcomes that could possibly happen when we should know that, you know, they're not going to happen. But just think about like how much, when we saw the deaths of, you know, Wolverine and Nightcrawler and all those guys on the space station, we were involved in it. Yeah. And for those issues, it, you know, it really impacted us. But then here we are 4 weeks later, and you know, all of that stuff is off the board. So that's like, you know, you got to create that momentary drama, but then it's always gonna go back to that starting point where, you know, Wolverine's back. You know, how many times has he been taken off the board? And you know, we get caught up in it. You know, we you know, in that moment we feel all the action, the suspense, the tension, and then however many weeks, however many months, however many years, he's back. So why don't we move into the issues here?
Yeah, let me so full disclosure, I read the issues wrong, and I didn't realize that until we started recording. Oh, so wow. I read Powers of 10 first, and then I read House of 10 issue 6 first. So not to confuse the watchers or the listeners, I am going to start with House of 10, those slides first. And then I'll circle back around to the beginning of the slides, and we'll do.
You're like the Maura McTaggart of the podcast. You went to the end point, and then you reincarnated, and you came back in and with your knowledge.
How fitting! Yes. Oh yeah. This is yeah. So it was. I'm surprised I wasn't more disappointed with the ending, having read it the wrong way, basically. So that's a good thing, I guess. Yeah. So, House of 10.
This is from House of 10. This is from House of
X.
10. Yeah. I'm sorry, House of X. Yeah.
House of X issue 6. Moira's secret cradle, which I knew about going into this issue. Why that was important. Because I was like, oh yeah, because I just read Powers of 10. But if I had started here, I would have been like, ooh, what does that mean? But I went in being like, oh, that's cool. Like sort of, yeah, whatever. Okay. But Xavier and Magneto go to meet with Moira. This is a flashback of sorts.
Yes. 1 month ago.
1 month ago, before all this began. And we don't see, it's interesting in this, I think this is year 10, right? If we're going by the Powers timeline, we don't see Xavier's face outside of the mask, which is a really interesting thing. And I'll get into that more about how that might be interesting and how it's going to play into future series. Basically based on Moira's diary entries in Powers. it's going to be interesting because I think this is sort of been one of those more creepy elements, is that we never see Xavier's face in anything but flashbacks to the past, and we don't see him now. So this is something that still keeps the creepy vibe going, and I like that. That we never see his face, and we'll also get a couple of this sort of we'll get a little bit of this also in Powers with the sort of evolved human being as well. This sort of view of like never seeing his face in important moments and things like that, so you never know what he's really thinking. And that kind of almost makes him more terrifying, more of a threat. At least that's how I'm getting it. But like also there's this great conflict where it's like, I guess it makes you feel unease because like it's creepy in nature not to see his face and for them to be hiding his face, even though we kind of know what he looks like already. So there's that contradiction. But also there's this very creepy approach to Xavier from the beginning of the series to now, but everybody looks up to him like some kind of god. And it's got this like almost cult horror film vibe to it, you know, where like, you know, if something like Wicker Man, everybody looks up to Christopher Lee's character and he's just a total creep and you don't understand why. Like that's just good horror. But I think this almost sort of has that vibe to it too. And I might be reading into it too much, but. So
this Charles Xavier here, he can walk, right?
Yeah, he can walk. Yeah.
So this has got to be, and we've dealt with all of this cloning of bodies, and we have the system to download memories, backups like every week to upload. Why didn't he give himself hair?
That's a good question. Yeah. All right, moving on. Xavier does a worldwide psychic message to all the living creatures all the living beings, intelligent beings on the planet, basically telling them about the sovereignty of the nation of Krakoa, talking about that they aren't. He has all these gifts that'll cure disease, but he's not going to give it to them. He's going to have them earn it, which again. Was really interesting reading Powers before this because I was like, oh, I see what he's doing. And again, we'll get into that when we get to Powers.
Okay.
Interesting way that we have these messages. It shows the change in Xavier as to like, you know, Xavier even references that he's not the same person that he's always sort of been in this universe, but also in sort of X-Men lore, right? He's always sort of the benefactor, the benevolent mutant superhero that, you know, gives to everyone. I was thinking about this too, is that, you know, Captain America and Xavier are kind of the Supermen of this, of the Marvel universe almost, that like together they're sort of the Captain America because he's sort of moral, like that kind of thing is sort of always seen as the Superman equivalent. But I almost think Xavier's more of the Superman equivalent, because he's so powerful that no one knows really how powerful he is. And he sort of chooses not to use his powers in like a way that would, you know, really change things. So this almost reminds me of like a Superman moment, basically like another like scary moment. Like if you saw Superman starting to talk like this, you get scared, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So like he's always had, so has he been sitting on this ability to, you know, psychically blast messages to the entire world, and this is the first time he's ever done that. He's never done that in like you know, Avengers versus X-Men. He's never been like, hey world, look what's going on, you know, we weren't in the wrong here, and now you know, the Avengers are coming after us. So it's interesting that this would be the first time that he would ever use that ability.
And then he uses it, like, again, it's such an invasion of privacy to do it to everyone in the world. And then on top of that, to basically be like, hey, I've always been benevolent, and now I have the option to really change things, you know, for the good of everyone. But I'm going to use the power that I've always had not to. You know, that's something that's pretty freaky.
Yeah.
And it's rationalized within the universe as this issue goes on, and then also in Powers, but still it's kind of freaky. And here's our Avengers shot. We were wondering when they would show up, and here they are.
Yeah.
And no real reactions from them or the Fantastic Four, the only other real superheroes that we've had some interaction with. And then there's Doctor Strange. Doves are something that's circled, and I'd like to go back through the series because doves are a motif throughout this whole series.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be interested to go through and look and see the scenes where doves show up. Because there's this moment right here, and there's one in Powers where Xavier's looking up at the sky and he sees the doves, and there are doves flying over Krakoa, or like bird-like animals that are fly over certain scenes. There's a scene where Apocalypse shows up in one of the more previous issues, and he's surrounded by doves flying around him and covering him. And I'm wondering if it's, again, it's sort of religious symbolism, something like that. Doves are sort of like holy creatures. They have some they have symbolic weight in like biblical terms and things like that. So I'm wondering if there is something more to these doves outside of just religious symbolism, like if they represent something. I know there's one passage in the Bible where I think I can't remember if like the Holy Spirit descends on them like a dove or something like that. So maybe that's why doves are here, like God's voice speaking and it's descending on them like doves or something like that. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's just a religious thing or if there is an actual like story reason to it. I'd like to go back through and look at that.
Yeah, and the doves, and I'm sure we will see this in the next issue, but the doves are seen in that sort of scene that we've seen with Mora and Charlie a few times.
Yeah, there's doves are repeated imagery along with hands and trees and these beautiful lens flares that we're getting right here. Love this shot of Xavier. This is interesting what he says. So he says, second, all mutants by birth can claim Krakoan citizenship. And I think this plays back to our questions about Franklin Richards. Mm-hmm. So Franklin is a mutant because he was born with his abilities. He wasn't given them. Right? So I think that's what this is all about, because he says mutants by birth. So I remember like one of my favorite episodes of like the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s was when he teamed up with X-Men. And I never really watched the X-Men show from the 90s. So I only watched the Spider-Man one. But in that series of episodes, they talk about how Spider-Man's a mutant. And I think that's sort of what they're talking about here. But like, he's not a mutant by birth. His abilities came afterwards. Like, he is a mutation. And something like the Fantastic Four would be mutants, or Captain America would be a mutant. But they're not by birth, right?
True.
So like it would be people who are born with their abilities, not like given their abilities. So yeah, by science or something like that.
Well, don't a lot of the X-Men have like a second mutation, like or is that universal for all X-Men? Like Wolverine has like pheromones and he has the healing factor. Right. Emma is a telepath and she has diamond form. Like, is that I would have to do like a complete rundown, but I'm just trying to think. I don't think like Scott doesn't have a secondary mutation. He just has optic blast. So maybe that can't be true for all X-Men or all mutants. So
yeah, well, so like because all the mutants seem normal at birth. Mm-hmm. Right. And then they like around puberty, they grow into their abilities, or something like a stressful situation brings them out. Like the gene gets unlocked, because it's all the X genes that they're born with, but they never really get unlocked. Mm-hmm. And then there are the so like the question, like those questions are something I'm guessing it would be cool to see Hickman answer.
Yeah.
As to like what he means by mutant by birth. Because like, does that mean Franklin had the X gene because his parents, were given the X gene or something like that, or if it was, I don't know, if like Spider-Man, maybe he had the X gene and that's why the spider, when it bit him, it gave him powers or something like that.
Okay.
But I'd be interested to see an infographic done by Hickman where he explains how the X gene works and how it like gives you citizenship in Krakoa and stuff like that.
Well, he's a big fan of this podcast, so I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure it's going to
we're
come
calling
up
him
soon.
out and we're asking for it, and we know he'll answer our questions.
Definitely.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is interesting. It goes back and we see all the characters that we've run into that are now dead.
Mm-hmm.
For these people on the Orcus space station.
Yeah.
Who sacrificed their lives so that Nimrod can come back online, the Mother Mold can come online. Get to see them one more time.
Yeah, and so this is
It was a lie.
Yeah. So you dropped out there for a second, but that's okay. We're on the slide where this is more seeing
yes.
Charles's statement.
Yeah. So yeah, Moira is this has significance again because I read Powers first. It's significant that he's saying that you closed your eyes last night believing this world would be yours forever. That was your dream, and like mine, it was a lie. Mm-hmm. And this plays into again what's going to happen in Powers, the final truth that Moira reveals, mm-hmm. In one of her final lives, or one of her lives, not one of her final lives, but one of her lives. And the truth is that humanity is what kills the mutants in the end. It's not machines. It's nothing like that. It's always mankind that wipes out mutants in the end. So the dream of Xavier was that mutants would inherit the earth naturally and come to humans and mutants would live together, and then that evolution would take over and eventually everyone would be mutants. Mm-hmm. And then the dream of humanity is to wipe out the mutants. But both dreams are lies. So this comes into the future being uncertain at the end of this series as to how is it going to end. Are mutants going to lose all the time, or are they finally going to win? But it's significant because Moira is the one that reveals that they always lose. Mm-hmm. And here's a new truth. While you slept, the world changed, which again is alluding to Moira changing things while everybody was unaware. And then this is all the people showing up for their meeting, the table meeting. Mm-hmm. So we have 11 of the 12 people that will be on this sort of round table of mutants.
Yes.
And Krakoa, the living guy, watching over everyone with how it's not Cypher, it's
no, it's Doug
Cypher.
Ramsey. It's Cypher. Yeah.
Cypher, yeah. Cypher sitting in the tree because him and Krakoa have a bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the table, pretty cool X table.
Yes.
You get to see all the people. We've got Jean, Nightcrawler, Storm. We've got Emma and what's his name?
Sebastian
Shaw.
Yeah.
The Black King, the White Queen, and then they are waiting for their Red King to join. We don't know who the Red King is. You think it might be? I think it might be Juggernaut. That's just me. We haven't seen any Juggernaut this time
around. That's a good. I'm just trying to figure. I don't know a lot of Hellfire members beyond Sebastian and Emma, so
I guess so. Yeah, Juggernaut may not. He wasn't a part of Hellfire Club, was he?
But he's always sort of in that
Brotherhood
of evil mutants. So just to sort of balance out the table, he would be a good choice.
But again, is Juggernaut a mutant? That's another thing too, because he
has like bands that give him powers, right?
Right, exactly. He's not a mutant necessarily. He's an X-Men villain, but not a mutant necessarily. So he may not be allowed in Krakoa. That might be something that they bring up in the further issues. So,
I mean, we always have that Franklin Richards card hanging over us. Like, you know, Franklin Richards on this, with his ability to shape realities would be an interesting choice.
Yeah, but there's the rest of everybody else on the table. I like how everybody's blocked. How they just to show off. This is Silva, right? Harvey Silva's art.
No, this is Larraz.
Sorry, Larraz's art. It's just great to see how he how he draws each of the X-Men's postures, you know, according to character. It's amazing to see that, and how he does it so naturally, where it doesn't seem stiff or really that planned out. There's this natural flow, the composition here, even with like an empty chair, just having this nice line
that points
leading
to her.
around.
Yeah,
it points to her, and then her blocking points to Shaw, and then Shaw's blocking leads you down. And this is beautiful too. Right here, you get everybody's sort of, you know, you learn so much about these characters, even if you didn't know these characters already, just by how they're posed. It's really beautiful. Masterful work.
So this page is a 4-panel page, and you know, the first panel is Jean in the middle. The second panel is Emma in the middle. The third panel, I'm forgetting this guy's name.
Paris.
Okay, and then it's Magneto. What would be interesting? Which would be interesting. Just for a composition, it would have been interesting if maybe Mystique was in the middle of that third one.
Yeah,
she played such a role in the the attack. So I mean, this guy's barely been there. But you know, that's just a nitpick. Or just a choice that could have been made.
There's something interesting to be pointed that out, because it would make sense to have her in there. And it's interesting that they break the pattern of having the female, you know, the 3 powerful female mutants that have been key in getting in fixing things to where like they are right now, because you're right, Jean's sacrifice helped them destroy the mother mold. Mystique sacrificed herself there too, but she also helped get the information about the mother mold in the Orcus space. Emma was the one that helped get all the stuff with the United Nations together, and also get Sebastian Shaw onto there. So it's interesting to have this panel break that pattern, but it also shows Mystique's character. It sort of like shows that she doesn't really want to be the center of attention.
She
just wants things to move along, that kind of thing, you know. She doesn't really care about this stuff. Whereas Paris, this guy, he does care.
Yeah.
And
that's true. Good point.
Yeah. But I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's a very good detail to notice. This is a great shot of Krakoa bringing down Sabretooth for judgment. Again, a lot of circles, a lot of spheres in Krakoa. Great motif, adding that together. Love the colors here. How Garcia did this beautiful like highlight work of showing the different types of wood, you know, like are basically the different states that this bark is in, that kind of thing, like a real tree would be. You know, it's not all the same color. There's these great like gradations, and lighter here, it's more warm and brown here. It's great to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then there's some nice fingerprint detailing over here into the branches to show this sort of nice this nice line work that shows it disappearing into the shadows. Fingerprints used really well, and also down here on his lower lip, using that fingerprint.
And it's neat that these sort of window frames or tree branch window frames are almost forming the X-Men logo.
Yeah, that's a great detail right there. Yeah, the X. And even now I'm looking at it, Sabretooth is sort of in an X shape.
True.
This. So yeah, very good use of motifs of the X motifs right here. This is a cool panel. This is something that's going to show up in Marvel guidebooks right here. The anatomy is so dynamic, and the foreshortening is really well done with the hands. It's a classic Sabretooth panel right here.
Yeah.
This is great. And I love, again, the colors, just beautifully well done, how he did the reflections coming off of it. Just marvelous color work in this whole series, and not like, you know, no less here. But also I love cross-hatching detail right here that Larraz did to show like the reflections and the different shades of the X symbol right here. It's just great work all around.
Yeah.
This is a great little moment of Emma. So they're trying to decide what to do with Sabretooth, and Sabretooth starts protesting, and then Emma says quiet, and he shuts up, and then Jean says quiet, and he like starts drooling.
Yeah, he's got two powerful telepaths messing with him.
Yeah, well, this also is a really painful scenario. It's this as a superhero comic where you think it's going to be light and stuff like that. There's some heavy stuff in here, and they draw out what they're going to do to Sabretooth for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
There are pages of just dialogue about what to do with him during the
Yeah.
scene. It's torturous because you're almost like they are torturing him almost because they're just taking so long to figure out what to do with him, even though Xavier knows what he's going to do with him.
Yeah, it's interesting that Wolverine is not on this board, considering the relationship he has with Sabretooth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and during this time, they're also deciding the laws. So the first law they decide on is not to kill human beings.
Yeah,
and Sabretooth is guilty of that. And then did you like this part with Nightcrawler where they asked him, because he's someone that believes in a higher power because he's Catholic.
Yes.
That was an interesting moment to call out his faith and his what's sort of something that's important to his character. And he basically quotes the "Be fruitful and multiply" passage from Genesis, and he says we need to make more mutants, which is the second law or the first law, I guess, and then that eventually comes up. But yeah.
And what's interesting here is that the person that gives him the the guff about his thoughts is his mom.
Is Mystique. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great moment of character and context. Again, showing that, if you were going to let one guy do whatever he wanted with these characters, it's good that they picked Hickman because he really cares about these characters and he knows where they come from. And he knows that a moment like that will really resonate with readers that are new to the series as well as fans. It's just a good moment right there.
So this is sort of a Marvel Universe as a whole sort of question I've always had, just for sort of the believers of the Catholic universes, your Nightcrawlers and your Matt Murdochs.
Yeah.
How can you believe in a monotheistic religion when Thor and Loki are running around? That would derail your whole belief system.
Well, that's the so I guess there are two things, and I know I've seen it in Prometheus. It's a stupid movie, but I do love it. There's a moment where they're asking that question about the main character in that movie is religious, and they're finding out that the aliens, that the engineers created humanity, and her boyfriend, husband, or whatever asks her how can you still believe in God when we find out that we were genetic experiments from aliens? And she's like, well, someone had to create them, right? I think I've heard that in a Marvel comic as well.
Okay.
And I think, and then of course there's the classic line from the first Avengers movie where Black Widow tells Captain America that they're gods, and he says, so there's only one God, ma'am, and they don't dress like that, or whatever it is, that kind of thing. So there's always sort of this then in this book too, they talk about the one higher power, that kind of thing. And then there's almost especially in Powers, they talk about how there are things even more powerful out there than what we know about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that they talk about in Powers as well. So it's interesting that you bring that question up, and then Hickman's answering it as he's going throughout the series is
True.
How can you believe in something higher power when Thor and Galactus exist and things like that? It's because this universe is constantly showing that there's always something more powerful out there. Yeah. But this is a great page. I love this composition. I love the reflection of Sabretooth right here.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier looking down upon everyone in judgment of everybody has to basically bow to Xavier's whims. And this page, sort of the composition and how everybody's below him and he's looking down, not just on Sabretooth, but on everyone else. Everyone has to respect his judgment in this moment.
Yeah.
It's a great moment right here. And then Sabretooth is as prevalent, but at the same time, he's still consumed by Xavier. in this panel. So just
Yeah.
to show where the power dynamic is, and this is sort of his last ditch attempt at trying to appeal to these people. This is a cool shot, I thought. Excuse me. Xavier being pulled down, and not Xavier, sorry, of Sabretooth being pulled down into the pits of Krakoa, and then Xavier looking down on him from above with these like jagged roots framing him, and frame with a red sky in the background. It's just a really heavy image, and a real like, you know, it gives you the sense of someone looking down in judgment, of like something all powerful looking down in judgment.
So, you know, there's been a lot of religious symbolism here, but this is sort of like, you know, casting somebody down to hell. So, you know, he's, you know, it's always, you know, you're always the sort of the thought is like hell is below us. So, you know, we have somebody casting judgment here on Sabretooth, and he's being sent down. So there's more of that here.
And that's symbolic of Satan in the Bible, because Satan was cast out of heaven because he wanted to be God, and basically broke God's rules. And that's sort of this moment is very evocative of that imagery of an angel being cast out of heaven, that kind of thing, into blackness. But there's also, Xavier says that he might let Sabretooth have a chance at redemption.
Yeah.
And then we get into this cool celebration scene, which is very Return of the Jedi like, except it's not Ewoks, it's mutants. And but it's still pretty spectacular how well colored it is. And then it's repeated again in Powers, but recontextualized in Powers, which for me it was Powers was recontextualized in this issue. So you get two sides of the story on both issues of this celebration as to why it's important, and both are successful unto themselves. This is a cool moment, I thought, between Wolverine and Jean. You know, these people have always had their issues in the past, but here in this moment, just to show the change, you see them sharing a beer. Like, you know, it's a cool moment, I thought.
Yeah, and you know, there's a bit of hubbub on the internet. I haven't read Uncanny 1, but this is, you know, looking at this panel of these three. If you've read any comics Twitter today, you've seen a little bit of discussion on the relationship between Scott, Logan, Jean, and possibly Emma.
Yeah, then you get a little bit of that in the panels that follow this. I don't have them screenshot here, but you do get a little bit of that between Emma and Jean.
Yeah, Jean hands Emma a beer, and she takes it, and then she
Emma gives Cyclops a look.
Yeah, and they certainly have their history together.
Yeah. This is a cool shot, I thought, of Wolverine going up to, and I can't remember this mutant's name up here, to give him a beer. It was a cool little moment, and then the issue ends. The issue ends the same as Powers ends. So we're going to circle back around, and we're going to do. I'm going to show everybody the slides I have for Powers of 10, issue 6, the last issue here.
Alrighty.
And here's the cover, which is really fascinating. It's Moira walking over the bodies of the X-Men. Pretty dark way of having a cover for the final issue, but it's evocative and emotional and provocative.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of X-Men, you know, Fall of the Mutants, and a lot of or probably a ton of other superhero characters, you know, with either, you know, Doom standing on top of a bunch of fallen enemies. So, you know, this is like a cool thing that like you see a lot of in superhero comics.
And I didn't think of that because this, you know, we could, just because I know this series and I know she's not the one directly causing the mutants to fall, but there could be the argument that she is, by how she messes with timelines, that she's sort of she could be the one that's trying to fix things, but she could also be the harbinger of the inevitable. which is that they always lose. So I didn't think about that this image is kind of loaded in that way, where is she the one that's vanquished the X-Men, or is she the one that's just sort of the last one there to witness all the the vanquishing of the X-Men? So that's a good point right here, and this is a pretty heavy image for that reason. Multiple meanings. And here's Xavier. We get this scene again of him at the fair.
Yeah. This is a full page splash.
Yeah, which we haven't seen very many, but these last couple issues have had a couple of them in there.
Yeah.
Again, recontextualized just basically because we know so much of what's happened and what's going to happen in this last one. And then we get the doves again, him looking upon the doves.
Yeah.
More religious symbolism. And then Moira comes up to him, talks to him about, it's very similar. It's the same conversation that they've had already.
Yes. Yeah. This was
twice
earlier.
Before. Yeah. We get these cards. Yeah.
We've had the circular pattern, of Moira's, journey and all those graphs. So for us to come back around again is sort of, fits with that.
Yeah, it does. And then these cards are recontextualized because when we first got introduced to these cards, we had only seen glimpses of these characters. We didn't know what importance they were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we know now that these guys will probably never exist, or maybe they will exist. We don't know. Maybe that's what this is sort of saying, is that these people that are from the future that supposedly got erased might end up existing anyways. At least that's sort of the question that's posed right here. I think that it could still happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Moira's reset it a couple of times. So this future with Nimrod and power, where the mutants have to struggle to survive, it could still be a viable future for the mutant.
Yeah.
And we get more of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And Xavier's smiling. He talks about his better world, dream for a better world. And he talks about how it's not a dream. And then we get these beautiful panels repeated again.
Yep.
And then we cut to year 1000.
Yeah, we are at the preserve.
And we get this beautiful shot of these pachyderms grazing. And we get to look at this guy who we've been following in year 1000. He's one of the elders of this time.
Yeah, it's the blue guy with the bald head and the sort of the circular pattern on his face.
Yeah, so we know that he's trying to merge all of the Earth with a parasitic hive mind race that will eventually go and join with another higher power and basically become godlike in a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
So then out of nowhere, this figure attacks him, and he's psychic. He has some telekinetic abilities. And
so do you think that figure is Black Panther? That wouldn't make a lot of sense, but
no, it's Wolverine.
It's Wolverine.
I'm pretty sure it's Wolverine or some mutant of some sort.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, actually, no, you're right. I think it's just some mutant. I don't think it's Black Panther. It's just a mutant.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense for it because Wakanda's already came out and I know this is in the future, but I did like the fact that when all the other nation states were making deals with Krakoa, Wakanda's we don't need any of your stuff. We can take care of ourselves on our own. We're not dealing with you. But
right.
Yeah. So, but
I don't think this is Black Panther, but it could be Sabretooth actually, with the fur coming off of his arms right here. Or something. And he's also a healer, so he could live for 1,000 years.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And there's a nice shot of him looking at all the mutants that live on this reserve. So he's basically keeping them in a zoo or a prison.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking to someone. We don't know who he's talking to. And then we find out it's Wolverine.
Yeah.
And Wolverine's looking pretty cool. And I like how Silva used the screen tones to create these nice little shadows of the trees cascading across him. And he does that throughout this whole issue. And,
that's pretty cool.
Even refers to Wolverine not as Wolverine, but as Logan Howlett James, which is kind of jumbled up of his name. I think it should be Logan James Howlett, or James Logan Howlett is what his name should be, right? I can't remember. It's interesting that it's sort of, he jumbles it up a little bit. And I just like this panel. I like this page composition. I love that these three are insets, and it's all designed around this big reveal of Wolverine.
Yeah,
he has this conversation he wants an honest conversation with Wolverine, who's sort of the leader of the mutants in this reserve. And but we would find out that the Elder doesn't not only want to talk with Wolverine, he also wants to talk with Moira. And Moira has somehow lived for thousands of years. And so we could presume, I guess, that since they're in Krakoa, she's probably been regenerating using the shells of sorts.
Yeah.
And we find out more later that she's sort of faked her death at one point and lived in hiding. And so she could have just been regenerating herself over and over again with Xavier's help, and then maybe at some point figured out how to do it herself as they learned how to maybe update their technology.
So with the other clones, where you go into the other body, they have the 1 week backups to sort of give you memories up to a point. But we don't see Charlie here, but because Moira can sort of die with the memories that she had and be reincarnated, maybe she doesn't need that weekly backup system.
That would make sense. Yeah. But I guess she still is on a linear time period, right? Okay. So that all her past lives are past. So she would still maybe need something like that, because so much of it depends on her memories and like what she remembers and things like that. So she would probably have to, but there'd be a lot more to back up with her. So maybe it would be harder for like Xavier to do it, because like she doesn't just have one, like half of her lifetime. She has wherever she is in her life, plus like the dozen of lives that she has before her. And then we get this conversation about how this guy wants to merge with the other aliens.
The Phalanx?
Yeah, the Phalanx. But he also talks about how this is what he's talking about, observing the mutants and trying to learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where he starts talking about the Phalanx.
Okay.
And I really like this page design right here. The black eyes, these are the windows to the soul, and they're black and lifeless, that kind of thing. Really, it's a good character design element that, this guy doesn't really have much humanity to him. And I like this page design. It's very cinematic, Oh,
yeah.
Like how the scope changes. So it's these 3 smaller panels and then 3 giant wide shots, of what's about to happen. So we really get the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, and the main character in each panel is sort of centralized.
Yeah. So you move through it really fast, and you get the point and you get the scale throughout the whole page.
Mm-hmm.
He basically describes how these guys are just going to eat everything and then take them into a black hole where they will sort of transcend into this higher form outside of space and time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the world is essentially ending. And like they say here, they're all going to die.
Yep.
Nice 9-panel grid here.
Definitely.
We're still not clear as to his motives of why he's here, though. And I like how the art reflects that. You know, he's not looking at them. He's covered in shadow. You know, it's a good way of building mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just like that. Yeah, the shadow of the leaves and the trees, and you just see his white, lifeless eyes right there.
Yeah.
And he basically says he wants to send away Wolverine and Moira because he knows that if Moira dies before they transcend, she could go back in time and prevent them from transcending.
Mm-hmm.
Basically wiping out all humanity and all mutants. Then, so he's going to send them away so that he has enough time to merge with the Phalanx, get into the black hole, become a god, so that he can see with outside of space and time and stop Moira if she ever decided to kill herself and reset things. Which is very similar to what Destiny said that Destiny was going to do earlier in the issue if Moira decided to wipe out all mutants ever again.
Yeah.
And then he asks them how would they prevent it. And Wolverine gets upset about that. And then the alien starts monologuing and talks about how great he is, about how great humanity is, and about how humanity put them in this place and is eventually going to be their downfall because they're the ones that are going to merge with the machines. Now the machines, they're like Nimrod and the Sentinels were just distractions so that humanity could buy time to wipe out all of mutants.
Mm-hmm.
I like these pages. We hadn't seen them in a while in a couple issues, so it's harrowing, you know. Less is more. This sort of reveal is a great reveal of just sort of being like, oh crap, that makes a lot of sense. Whereas like, oh my gosh, you never saw it. It was never, you know, they were so focused on making sure the machines never got into power. They never thought about the people who created the machines.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wolverine's solution is just to kill the dude. I love these two panels right here. The sequence of, you don't even get to see this guy's reaction. He just kills him, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how Wolverine deals with it. He's just like, you know, less talk, more action, that kind of thing. Let the guy monologue, and at some point he's just going to get fed up and murder him.
Yeah.
Which the guy should have known.
He's the best at what he does, and what he does is not very nice.
No, it's not at all. But I do like this. I like this sequence right here. You know, similar angles, but like, you know, different moments. This is closer up just so you can get the impact, and then it backs off as the guy falls down, just dead weight.
Yeah, and it's implied again. You know, we talk a lot about the design and implying movement, but this is, you know, you sort of feel this guy sort of either sliding down the tree slowly or dropping quickly. Probably more dropping quickly because of the thump sound effect that's put there. So you know,
it's great to have this has a nice composition of these nice this almost does have a like we were talking about the last episode, it's got this nice curved sort of composition.
Mm-hmm.
Where you start here and then you sort of circle around here and then follow it down here, and the hands sort of point your way off the panels. So there's this nice composition that lets your eye wander around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are all these nice loops and going through. And then what's also cool, I guess, is that if you start here and you see the claws, and then you follow the tree line here, you follow his arm back here, and then the thunk also goes along with the form of his arm to this next arm. But your eye stops on the thunk to read that. So you pause a little bit more just so you can get the full impact of things. And then your eye leads off. And then this page is a little smaller, but like you said, he could be sliding down. And then that thump right here while you're reading this dialogue.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool panels. I like this moment. Again, hands are very important to this issue, and this is just sort of a sweet, intimate moment. Also showing that Wolverine's gotten with every woman in X-Men lore, pretty much. Even Moira. Sorry, Charles.
Yeah, well, it's 1,000 years into the future.
That's true. Yeah. What's she gonna do? What's he gonna do? Yeah. Classic snicked action. This is also another beautiful moment. I just sort of like silhouettes. It's really beautiful. And we had this moment in year 100.
Yeah.
And Slash, one more time, does what he does best. Kill women for the greater good. Not really. There's more to it than that, obviously. But
yeah. No, but we've seen this imagery before, and this whole 12 issues, this whole series put together, it's been a lot of repeats, a lot of circles. Jonathan Hickman likes circles in his graphics and his storytelling. So.
Yeah, because that's something we were talking about earlier, that superheroes in the mythic sort of Joseph Campbell kind of sense, I guess, their hero's journey is always cyclical. It's always going to come back around that the villain's never going to be defeated on their hero's journey, right?
Yeah,
the villain's always going to come back. So that Hickman sort of incorporating that into his story as well is pretty brilliant and pretty meta. But yeah, then we get this shot of Xavier waking out of that fever dream, and of fever, not dream, but fever vision of the future, realizing that they're always going to lose. Is this a splash page right here?
It is. It's almost a half with an inset panel.
Okay,
of her talking. Yeah, but it's.
And then, he basically says, like, he proposes all these solutions that typical Xavier would propose, and then she kisses him for that, and she says, "You've never changed." It's not a compliment, basically meaning Xavier's got to change in order for the future to be different. He's got to stop being the benevolent, all-powerful being. Become something different. Walking into the sunset. Walking into the future, I guess. And then we get these nice little journal entries of Moira talking about these different things. And I guess we really don't know, are the entries years or months? We don't know what these numbers represent, like entry 14, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we don't. And we have a few that are redacted. So
yeah, a few that are redacted, again, much in Hickman's style. But at this last chunk is sort of what I wanted to focus on, that my paramount fear is that I fracture his psyche and eventually unleash something unexpected on the world, which I think gives grounds to sort of being afraid of Xavier in the present, that kind of thing. That we don't know what he's going to do, if he's good or if he's bad, because he's something completely different, but still the most powerful mutant alive. And then we have this thing about Magneto, that they've lost Magneto and that he's an enemy. So we don't know if that's something that's going to happen again. Is Magneto eventually going to be a villain again? He's not going to be the ally anymore. And then she says, "I'm just as bad as they are, if not worse," which again, I think sort of gives grounds to what we were talking about with the cover, that she might be, whether it's unintentionally, she's sort of the cause of the vanquishing of the X-Men. And then here we are, Moira's no space.
Yep.
Boa. Well, we find out also that she fakes her death and goes to live in this no space.
Yes.
And Xavier and Magneto come to visit her, and talks about the council meeting, which we witnessed in House. We hear about all the different seats and who's sitting at them. Magneto does this cool thing where he molds the cups out of metal and then pours the tea into them. Thought that was a cool little detail in there.
Yes.
But also Xavier reveals that Destiny's going to be a part of the table. And Destiny is the one that threatened Moira to begin with. That Destiny could be the one that will reveal what's going to happen in the future if she looks at Moira's future.
And
And
this is not going to make Mystique happy at all.
no. Yeah. No. Because Mystique and Destiny are best buds. So Xavier says he's going to try to hold them off, put them all off so that they don't know the truth just yet.
Mm-hmm.
And but Xavier reveals he wants them to know. He wants them to know that they're always going to lose. And but Xavier says that that until now we've always lost, but the time is going to be different. And Magneto says, "For we are different," and they are different, and that makes them scary.
Yep.
And then we get the Ewok Return of the Jedi party again.
Yeah,
and
we repeat. Yeah.
Yeah, but we get it recontextualized in sort of a more harrowing, ominous way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Is this really going to solve anything? Is anything really going to be solved, or is the cycle going to continue?
Yeah, where the other one, it was sort of everybody celebrating and feeling well, or feeling happy. You have Apocalypse moping. You have Eric and Charlie sort of having a serious conversation with them. So it is the same, but it like you said, it's
recontextualized.
It's a different point of view, or a different set of characters in the same situation.
Yeah, and this is like they have this panel in house,
mm-hmm.
and it's not as threatening. Like you said, it's more of him moping. But here, you're almost like, it looks like he's up to something.
Yeah, we're setting the seeds for we've reset the X universe, but we're sort of hinting at all of these people that were bad guys or villains or foes in X-Men lore. They're sort of set up to go back that way. Like, we have the journal entry that they lost Magneto, he's gone bad. We have Apocalypse sitting here. Mystique is not gonna be thrilled when she finds out about Destiny not being brought back. So she can easily go back to that role in the evil, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So we're sort of hinting at that these people can go back to the traditional roles while resetting the X-Men universe. So they might not necessarily do it, but we're sort of like, hey, you remember all those things that you did like? They could come back.
Yeah, there's definitely it's definitely open-ended. And this series could almost be seen as like a deconstruction of X-Men and superheroes in general, and just about how, if you want to look at superheroes and how superhero comics work, and if you want to rationalize why they work the way that they do, this book is sort of about that, about how that there's going to be this never-ending battle between superheroes and supervillains, or just the world in general, like the people that they're trying to save.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to see too is, again, like, people are always going to make the same mistakes, I guess. Like, that's sort of the thing, is that like things that are now relabeled as mistakes or like inevitable moments in time that are just going to happen no matter what you try to do. So what's interesting is I guess that Moira seems to be mentally unstable within good reason, because of how many lives she's lived and how many times she's seen people die.
Mm-hmm.
So she's paranoid about Destiny coming back on, and that shows just her mental she's mentally unstable. Moira's mentally unstable, but also afraid of the truth, even though hiding the truth has sort of been the issue this whole time. And that was sort of her big thing, was revealing the truth to Xavier. But it's, so she's sort of all conflicted inside, and with good reason, because we don't know what the real way to save the world is at this point, or to save mutant kind is at this point. Yeah, but these guys seem hopeful, and Magneto's ready to die for this. And yeah, and he basically says things that he said in the first issue, that, you know, he's not ashamed of who he is, and he knows that he's all powerful.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we end it.
Yeah. And so, like we said earlier, this is sort of like, you know, find out more as these new series go. So I know I said earlier that I wasn't thrilled with it, but I feel like on this second go through with you on the podcast, I enjoy it more, and I feel like that's been true for a lot of these issues. Sort of the
Yeah.
first read is sort of like, okay, and then the second one was like, oh, I see, you know, this element or this aspect of it. So I think on this review here, I'm a little bit more pleased with these issues.
And I really love going over these multiple times too. And we've talked about it before. You know, this is a disposable medium, you know, if there ever was one, of storytelling. And, you know, disposable not in the sense that we throw it away, but if you're a collector, you put it in a bag and a board and you throw it in your box, that kind of thing, you know, and you rarely ever go back and you read it again. So this is something that's always great. I think this it's always good to go back and read through comics and to appreciate their artwork and storytelling. And there's, not to disrespect our Ed Piskor or anything like that, but there's definitely a grand design within this series, you know, that like, and that respects the grand design that came before it. So I'm not trying to disrespect Ed Piskor. I'm borrowing his terms. Yeah. That kind of thing. So Ed Piskor, you know, he has that great series about the grand design of X-Men, where he basically takes all the developments from X-Men history and puts them into one series. So, you know, everything is consistent across the board. And Hickman respects that grand design that came before him, and to make something that's of a grand design as well, that will lead to something greater, you know?
Yeah, he took a lot of elements, you know, from X-Men stories that we've known from, you know, the far past to the recent future, you know, the development with those you know, those 5 mutants that were so important to building the clones. I mean, that was a recent, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago development with Bendis's run. So like, he's taken stuff from, you know, the Kirby Lee days and you know, anything up to the Bendis run. So he's sort of merged a lot of stuff together.
Yeah, and then the artists have followed in suit with their, you know, how they design the characters and how they place them and how they act. And, you know, there's a consistency throughout these books between the creators, and that's pretty great to see. That you don't see a lot in Big 2 comics, and especially Big 2 comics that are event comics that are built to sort of sell new number ones. So it's pretty great to see this series, and it's, you know, this only comes around every once in a while, so it's pretty great to see it.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that was a pretty thorough recap of those 2 issues.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that we both enjoyed reading these. We both enjoyed the series. So I'm interested to see what comes next in the X universe, and hopefully how the X-Men interact with the Marvel universe more as a whole, as we moved out of these sort of 12 self-contained issues. We'll probably get a lot more interaction with the Marvel U. So I think that's going to do it for us. I'd like to let everybody know that we are currently running a Kickstarter for the reset. That's on Kickstarter right now. So if you want to go on to Kickstarter and search for the reset, or check out the show notes where I will put a link to the Kickstarter. Anybody who could take a look at it, share it. We'd really appreciate it. If you want to give us a follow on social media, we are on Twitter at ConstructCompod. We are on Instagram at ConstructingComicsPod, and we are on Facebook at Facebook.com/Constructed Comics. We also have a YouTube channel under the same name of Constructed Comics, and we will put this video up as we went through all those wonderful slides Noah put together. So I'd like to thank everybody. We'll be back with another episode very soon, and thank you for joining us.